All right, I want to bring in Jason Buttrill, who is with me and is going to explain exactly what is going on with this one report from one source. So I say that clearly at the beginning. There's problems with this reporting because it is one source, and I wouldn't take that from the New York Times as gospel. So let's remember one source, but it's pretty damning. It has a ton of facts. Tell me the story, Jason, on what happened and where this report's coming from.
I struggle to even really describe how to even tell the story because it sounds like, are you familiar with the term fan fiction?
Yes.
It's like, that's what it's like off the internet. Like, what would really happen if Anakin Skywalker didn't become Darth Vader? And this
Right.
is the story.
Right.
That's what it sounds like.
Right.
But, I mean, Mike Lee is exactly right. If this is true, this is an act of war. And what they're alleging is that the CIA, the Biden administration, came up with a plan to eliminate the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, to blow it up. And we all remember, I think I even came on this program and said, I think you asked me, it was like, do you think this was us? And I'd be, and then I was like, well, no, we would never risk something like a direct attack on a Russian asset.
Right.
Never risk it.
Here's the thing. I think it was Germany or Sweden. Somebody just released a report that showed Russia didn't do it.
Yeah.
And how many countries have the ability to do something like this? This was not an easy hit.
Not an easy hit, and not even an easy hit for Americans. I mean, it would take a long time. I mean, it would take very specific assets, like, SEAL Team 6 or something like that.
Correct.
But the article goes into that. They couldn't use a SEAL Team 6 or anyone in JSOC's, Joint Special Operation Command, because they'd have to go through Congress. Now, this is a big part of the story, if true. They use some obscure Navy divers that are not part of JSOC. So then the CIA could use them in a joint intelligence operation, not a military operation, an intelligence operation. That would allow them to keep this quiet from Congress. Now think about that. Like Mike Lee said, this would be an act of war if we did it and they found out, but we didn't inform Congress about it, if true. So there is multiple layers to this, even right off the bat.
Who is this written by?
This is written by a guy named Seymour Hersh. He wrote for the, I think, New York Times.
He was a guy who got the Pulitzer for exposing the My Lai.
Yep, Vietnam.
Right, Vietnam. Mm-hmm. So, and he has done many, exposés, but they generally kind of lean against America, do they not?
Yeah, there was the one in, I guess the bigger one would be Osama bin Laden, questioning, how all of that went down. He even actually questioned Osama bin Laden's culpability in 9/11. So it almost, This is what you kind of see with journalists nowadays, especially, we saw this in the Russiagate stuff. It's almost like they got on this Woodward and Bernstein high, and they all want to top each other off of it. So, like, where do you go after topping something like, Woodward and Bernstein? They're, like, getting more and more fantastical and always trying to one-up.
Well, but not necessarily. I mean, this story is why you need a credible press, why you need journalistic standards and not activists.
Yeah.
Because we are dealing with a story now that, if it is true, the American people wouldn't have gone for this, but it's the American people, if true, that will pay the price. It will be our sons and daughters fighting a war with Russia and probably half of the world because of something our out-of-control deep state did.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have been for it. Now, how do we prove it? Who do you believe? Do you believe the investigators with Congress? Do you believe the investigators from the New York Times? Who do you believe? There's one source on this, which I'd love to have, because you were former military intel. So I would love to have your thought on this. Something this large, because the story is pages and pages and pages and has great detail in it.
Yeah.
It's all coming from one source. What are the odds that something this secret, this complex, had more than a few, maybe five key holders that could unlock all of the information.
So let me just, from my intel perspective, and my real-world experience is Afghanistan. I was one of the first ground troops conventional into Afghanistan after 9/11. So I was part of the planning phase, just on my small level, my unit. I didn't know that certain things that were going on in northern Afghanistan. Knew a lot of stuff in south. When we got on the ground, I didn't even know that there was special forces in certain areas that had been there for a while. That was not my need to know. Didn't need to know that.
Correct.
And that was right before a war. So just that perspective. There's no way, in my mind, that a mid or lower level, I'll say that carefully, person would have operational knowledge in that detail. You would need cabinet level or director level access.
Now, it's interesting because the way you're phrasing this, and you're being very, very accurate on things, a cabinet level or director level might have this information. Why would you bring up director level information on something this sensitive? And I mean, director level, this was done by the CIA, okay? So at least in this report, done by the CIA. So it would mean what? Like the director of the CIA? Why would he rat himself out?
I mean, that's a really good question, unless he was doing his duty and did not believe in what they were doing.
Is there any example of a director level spilling their guts on something like this?
Deep Throat?
Deep
What was Throat?
Oh, that's right. That was the director of the FBI, right?
Which we found out years. Was it decades?
Oh,
later?
decades. Yeah, decades later.
Decades later. But then we were always like, there's no way. Like, how is he getting all this information? That's like, how the heck? That was a big part of it. Who is your source? Never would have believed in my wildest dreams that it was the director of the FBI. Never. And that's like this. Like, will we decades later say, how the heck did this guy get his information? We find out it was the director of the CIA.
If it's true.
If it's true.
Now, where do you go from here? Where do we go from here? Because no Western ally is going to verify this.
No
Western. I mean, even if it is true, and they hate the fact that it's true, they know if we say, you know what, I think it was the United States, this is an act of war.
Yeah.
And Russia has the righteous stance in the world to take us down, or attempt to take us down, take us to war. Yeah. That is an act of war. So what does this mean? How do we ever find out anything?
Russia has actually responded, and they've said that because of these new air quote facts, that the White House needs to respond to this or to answer. Of course, the White House, the State Department, and the CIA have all been asked, and they've all categorically denied it. But the article was so specific, to answer your question, in certain ways that, in the time frames that they pulled this off. For instance, the article goes into, there was a big naval exercise that they used as cover to send in these divers.
And that exercise did happen.
That exercise did happen. He even puts a link into their specific excuse about using divers to show off the capabilities of their mine clearing capabilities.
But it's. I mean, even Satan uses some truth and then mixes it with falsehood.
Right.
So I mean, that doesn't prove anything.
Right. But so there's that, which maybe they could, I don't know, use some kind of, maybe they were surveilling the areas, maybe they could look at something, I don't know. But then they also goes in very specifically the type of mine they use to get around the Russian detection capabilities. They go into that. Then they go into, and this kind of seemed weird, about how they were going to detonate like 72 hours or 48 hours after this exercise.
Correct.
And then all of a sudden they had this afterthought of, oh, maybe that seems kind of suspicious. Maybe we shouldn't just have it on a timed detonation a couple of days after the exercise.
That doesn't
jive with me.
No, that doesn't.
So then they were like, oh, let's send in this like buoy that like has this high-tech ping that can, we'll drop it from a plane and it'll set off these charges. That also seems odd to me. That also seems something that the Russians might be able to verify. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised right now if there are Russian surveillance planes flying over the area, gathering intel, possibly, attempting to go and take a second look. I definitely don't think we've heard the last of this. So I'm sure they're going to try and verify it if they can, but they're Russians, really. So even if they don't, they're probably just going to say, yeah, they did it anyway, right?
I mean, I would.
I would too.
I would. And quite honestly, I'm not sure we didn't do it.
I'm not either.
Yeah.
Which is wild. I never would have thought of this.
20 years ago, I would have said absolutely not. No way. No way. But if you hit me today, if 9/11 happened and we heard, Bush and Clinton, and we had exactly what happened with Sandy Berger at the National Archives, where he's smuggling documents out about Bush and Clinton, and anything related to Osama bin Laden prior to the bombing, I would deeply question our government. We have come a long way on finding out how bad our government can be and has been in the past. The problem with this is you are going to pay the price. If this happened, or if Russia decides to go with it, your son, your daughter, you're going to pay the price. And that's what's so infuriating. Because if it is true, the American people should demand that these people, whoever was involved, whoever had this decision, is in prison and punished. And you know what? I would be fine. I don't care who it is. Let me just say this, and it wasn't, couldn't have been because he wasn't in office. But to show you how passionate, even if it was the former president, go ahead, send him over to Russia. Let him face a trial over in Russia. I'm sorry, but you do something like this and you don't inform Congress. I mean, this is the tweet from Mike Lee last night. I'm troubled that I can't immediately rule this suggestion that the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream out. He can't rule it out. I checked with a bunch of Senate colleagues. Among those I've asked, none were ever briefed on this. If it turns out to be true, we've got a huge problem. Yeah, we do.